Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for another session in our servant leadership series, where today we're going to take a look into the pillar of foresight. So we know all about student needs, staffing requirements, budgetary constraints, and so much more. But how are we going to use all of this to then plan how you will accomplish your goal? So, servant leaders like you leverage the power of foresight to achieve their goals effectively by using skills like observation, communication, experience, and reasoning to analyze, evaluate, and then guide your decisions. Before we jump into today's topic too far, though, we do have a disclaimer.
This resource was developed in 2024 by the Nita M. Lowy 21st Century Community Learning Center's 21st CCLC, National Technical Assistance Center, NTEC, funded under a grant from the U.S. Department of Education Department and administered by Synergy Enterprises Incorporated under Cooperative Agreement Number 287E230009 with the Department's Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. Opinions expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the position or policy of the Department, nor does mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the Department or the federal government. This resource is in the public domain. Authorization to reproduce it in whole or in part is granted.
All right, well, my name is Brittany Stanton, and I am a TA liaison with the 21st CCLC NTAC. My background is in 7 years as a classroom educator, and then about 5 years in an OST programming, serving as a program leader and leading that organization through actually becoming a 21st century community learning center. And so I'm joined today here by my colleague Chaz.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chaz Sumners. I'm also a TA liaison. I taught special ed for 11 years, and throughout the course of 10 years, I worked my way up from frontline staff all the way up to the director position in an after-school program that serviced a fairly large township. So a lot of breadth of experience, and I can't wait to share that with you guys, and I can't wait for you guys to share your experience with us.
Thanks, Chaz. I'm really excited for today's conversation and to hear how folks are thinking and feeling about foresight. Because I know learning about foresight for the first time was just it was a really important step that as a former program leader, like I had to get to that point. But we'll dive into that. So NTAC, we've talked about our mission along the way, but just as a reminder that our goal is to support all 21st CCLC, anybody that's a SEA or professional within 21st CCLC to help you guys obtain the knowledge and skills to implement in programs that then engage students and their families to build a successful future. And we do that by addressing several priority areas, things such as the impacts of COVID-19, SEL needs of students, academic focus areas, which include a long list of things that we're doing to support, such as STEM activities or supporting rural area programs, aligning those academic and mental health needs with the traditional school day. You can see the long list there on your screen. So today, we're going to talk about foresight. And we're going to try to better understand the role that foresight has for leaders like you. We're going to use something called a 2x2 matrix, which we'll talk in depth about to anticipate challenges in the field and then formulate a plan to address those challenges. And we'll have some time to utilize foresight to look at vision and like how you move things forward as a leader. But what is foresight, right? So you can predict and understand the impacts of actions and help navigate a better course through foresight. You have an acute awareness of the realities of student needs, staffing requirements, budgetary constraints, and just everything that affects your program. And you also reflect openly on past lessons, things that did go well, didn't go well, while incorporating whatever is your present reality to then predict your program's future and what it's the likely situations and circumstances you might encounter. Foresight is kind of that crystal ball. We don't actually have one, but through your work as a leader and understanding the needs of your program, you can help grow your skills of foresight to help ensure a strong future for your programs. So let's talk a little more about what are the benefits of foresight. Sometimes we get stuck in the day to day and we're not really thinking about what is in the beyond for our programs. But when we're using foresight, it can help prevent problems before they actually come up. And this is important because it allows you to be able to consider the possible way things are going to pan out and create potential solutions towards resolving whatever those issues may be, preventing the problems before they happen. It can also allow you to more quickly then address the challenges when they happen because you've already thought about the possibilities and you've already made a plan of how you're going to move forward. Now, there's always the chance that, out of all of the foresight in the world, there's going to be possibly things that come up that you will not have thought of, and that's okay. But exercising foresight and building those skills to try to think about as many possible scenarios and solutions as possible will help you more quickly address whatever challenges as they come up. It also allows you to be open to new opportunities. And it creates that vision of the opening of your eyes to be able to see where you can grow and where you can change. And it can also help you clarify your organization's vision. We'll talk a little bit more about vision later in today's session, but we spent a significant amount of time talking about vision in our session on conceptualization and its importance for your organizations. And sometimes the skill of foresight is what you're going to need to help with that vision process. So in my own personal experience, the program that I worked in was having we were wrestling with the actual building itself. Like the square footage was no longer fitting the students that were coming to the program. The building itself was needing certain repairs and things that we knew along the way coming down the road that, okay, we need to address this issue. And so I was able to take a look into what are our options for the future and start to work together with my stakeholders to figure out what do we really want? Where do we really want to go? And what do all these possible options have for us in that vision we have for the future? What's going to serve that purpose for us? So it's very important. Again, crystal balls aren't real, but to exercise foresight as much as you can because it really will benefit your programs and how you move into whatever comes next. But there are always going to be challenges, right? Mentioned that there could be present challenges along the way. I'm sure many of you have gotten sucked into the day to day because there's an urgent need right now that you have to address. And it's very easy to stay and live in that space. But as leaders, we also need to be able to get to a point where we're delegating and we're managing our staff and our teams to be able to do the work that the program needs to function so that you as leaders can then spend the time developing foresight, thinking about what the future is for the program, and all of those things, right? There's still going to be the days where you're going to have to stop and address whatever the challenge is, right? There's going to be other things coming down the pike that you may see as a present challenge, whether it's funding or maybe you're having attendance challenges. There's going to be things that are going to hold you up, and that's okay. But exercising your ability around foresight to help mitigate what those problems might look like in the future is an important skill. Um, Similarly with competing priorities, right? We're drawn in so many different directions. We're wearing so many different hats, and that's going to impact our ability to dedicate time to foresight. Uncertainty around that big picture. You can have that big, hairy, audacious goal, but it can be scary, right? And you can see where you want to head, but maybe not how are you going to get there, or once you get there, is it going to be sustainable, right? Those questions that kind of leave us feeling, well, I don't know if this is going to pan out or not. That uncertainty. And then there's organizational resistance. So this can look different depending on who are your stakeholders and how your program's structured, right? You may, as a leader, have a vision and you want to go here, but your stakeholders may not be on the same page. That's where some of those other pillars come in, like persuasion and listening, to figure out where exactly your stakeholders also want to go, and maybe work together to minimize that resistance. There's some important skills that you need, though, for foresight. And a lot of these will sound familiar because we've talked about them in other pillars. But you're going to need to be able to use observation. This is important because foresight means that you're taking what you have learned from the past, good or bad, and using it to inform the path forward. You need to be able to carefully observe what's happening around you, the data, the track record, and be able to describe what's going on and then why you need to go a certain direction. And communication is always key, right? It happens in teams. Excuse me. As a servant leader, your teams are so important, and you have to communicate with them. What makes servant leadership really unique is that while you are the leader and people are looking to you for big ideas, you are not the end all be all. You're looking at your stakeholders and communicate with them on a regular basis to bring different experiences together and maximizing prior knowledge, because it is really a communal effort. Experience. You're going to need to apply your experiences, what you already known, what you've done in the past, how it worked out, to help guide that direction of your actions. And then you'll need to do some reasoning. So based on both observation, communication, and your experience, you'll need to use then logic to predict the most likely future and outcome, and then plan your actions. So practicing foresight, having these skills will be extremely helpful, working on those skills, building those skills. But how do we actually practice it? So in order to practice foresight and be effective, you really need to take a moment and do an analysis of the past. Excuse me. So you're taking that time to understand the past and use that information to inform your predictions for the future of your program. Foresight is not random guessing. It is instead really taking an evaluative look at the data in order to predict. So we're going to analyze the past, we're going to evaluate what we see, and then we're going to use that to help plan ahead and create things that are going to guide the organization into the future and how you respond to surprises. This little 3-step process is something that we do almost on a daily basis in so many other capacities. Now we're going to try to apply these to having that skill of foresight for the future. So we want to hear from you a little bit. Thinking about these things, there are 4 characteristics of foresight that are effective for leadership. I've talked a lot about the future thinking, paying attention to the trends, predicting how they will impact the future. There's also scenario planning, making a plan for how you're going to respond to different possible future scenarios. When challenges come up, you'll be ready to act because you've already made a plan. Having that vision, not just thinking about the immediate future, but thinking about the long term, and agility. So things do not always go as planned. You might have to take you might, we all experience this whenever we shut down with COVID-19 and we had to pivot. Excuse me. Effective leaders like you can anticipate and plan for the future, but also you need to be ready to change whenever the future crops up with a surprise, right? So let's think about the future, your programs, and what we're currently experiencing in the out of school time field. I want you to think about some current trends in the field. What do you see? What do you think are some challenges that we are going to face in the coming 2, 3 years? Some of these trends might be things that are already happening to us in this moment, but some things might be even bigger. Some examples. Well, we all know that the funding loss of the ESSER funds running out from the pandemic is very real for many of the programs out there, as well as other budgetary cuts. What about increased needs in rural areas as schools might be changing their schedules from a 5-day week to a 4-day week? I want to take a moment for you to grab your annotation tool, which you can locate by going to the top of your screen where you see Brittany is sharing screen, and you can select the annotation drop down. And I want you to go ahead and just add right here on the screen. What are some of the other challenges that you believe that OST is going to face in the coming 2 to 3 years? We'll give you a couple of seconds to find your tool and add to the screen. If you resonate with the examples on the screen as well, feel free to stamp those with a star, letting us know that that is resonating with you. Chaz, when you were in OST programs before you started this work, what things were you seeing as potential challenges in 2 to 3 years?
I know right when I left my after school programs, they were implementing new curriculum across the board. So, and I wasn't getting a lot of communication with the teachers to align that with the stuff that I was doing in my after school program. So there was the danger that the stuff that we were doing in the after school program wouldn't be really relevant anymore. And that was a real challenge that we were dealing with. And sometimes you have to use that communication to reach out to, if not the teachers, then maybe some admin there so that there can be some more flexibility. And that's what I started doing.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Chaz, for chiming in on that. I
Absolutely.
totally have seen that in so many folks that we've talked with. And I see here on the screen as well, we've got some folks chiming in. We've got yes to some budget cut coming down the pike, increased rural needs. We also have changes in population. I know that this is very real. Depending on, I mean, it happens all across the U.S., but depending on where you are, you might be feeling it now that there are changes in your population happening, and it might be really intense right now, or you might even just be in the beginning stages of seeing this happen, where we have uh, migrant populations that are changing within our programs, um, or even just opened up, and now like half of your student body is going to that other school now. I've seen that happen. Similar with schools closing. Oh my gosh, your school closes. Where does your program go if you don't have a building to host it in? Staffing challenges. We hear this all the time, and it is very, very real right now to find folks that are interested in work, and particularly part-time positions. And it takes a special kind of person to work with children. So we definitely, this is a challenge that's very real to us, but we don't want to enter that space of just hiring anybody. That is going to only bode ill will for your programs, right? But it just makes it even more challenging to find those high quality people that are interested in doing work. We also have lower caregiver buy in due to the distance created by COVID. And this feels a little bit differently depending on where you are across the United States, because every part was affected. We all share the experience of COVID-19, and but every area went through that differently, right? There's schools that shut down. There's schools that did hybrid learning, virtual learning. There was the progression. Excuse me. There was the progression of coming back to school, and I know that I saw this in my OST program. As we started to come back in person, people were really very hesitant um, to go anywhere still. The population that I worked with was primarily an urban setting, predominantly lower income Black families, and they they didn't want to come back to program because they didn't feel like it was safe. Now, granted, the program I worked in also was musical, and there was a lot of research out there saying that singing was dangerous with COVID, and there was a lot of mixed feelings. So it took a long time to get things running again. And there are places that are still feeling it, even though it's been a couple of years that we've been back in person. Thank you all for sharing that. I I think this is so insightful, and I'm glad that you're able to kind of articulate some of those things that you're seeing being challenges, whether it's now in 2 or 3 years or a progression over that time. Having that is the beginning stage of foresight. So I'm going to clear our annotation tools here. And let's talk about scenario planning, which was the second way that we can work our skills of foresight. So scenario planning is it's very important to practice. About like emergency plans, and we do a lot of like fire drills, but we need to do this planning and this practice on a larger scale for the future of our programs. So what does this look like? It looks like a contingency plan. So for instance, we would have never known that COVID-19 was coming down the pike until it happened. But now we know that that was a reality for us. What's your contingency plan if there's something that's going to force a shutdown again? Are there things that you learned along the way through your experience and running programs during that trying time that you would repeat or that you would change? What's that contingency plan for when things go sideways? This ties into managing uncertainties, right? We don't really know what the future is going to hold, but if we know that we're going to be losing funding because that bucket of funds is running dry, we can manage the uncertainty of funding by exploring other scenarios and other options of funding. Clarifying hidden assumptions. So if we are assuming that the population is going to change in a couple years, and your program might become more of a multilingual learner student body and families, what hidden assumptions might you have around working with multilingual learners? And can you clarify anything around that might provide some truth and some guidance on, okay, well, how do we really support students in this changing dynamic that you haven't had the experience in previously? Understanding multiple perspectives. This is, again, going back to leaders. Yes, being you are the leader, but not you are not the only person in control, the only voice that matters, right? To understand the multiple perspectives of your stakeholders in your scenario planning. What do others think are going to happen or would be good practices? and testing strategies. So, with whenever we think about testing strategies, we can see the where our students are successful, and we have the added benefit in OST to be able to see how different learning styles might suit them better, and what can we do to support them, um, and thinking about what strategies can you implement to help them be more successful, and trying them out, giving them a test run, right? Perhaps it is creating a blended learning environment, testing that strategy to see if it's going to help impact their students' progress so that they can be more successful in their school day. So scenario planning has a lot of different things for you to think about, um, but it can all be it can all kind of be predictable, developed by taking a stop and looking at what is driving what are the drivers impacting the future of my program. So that brings us to talking a little bit more about what exactly a driver is. We've alluded to these so far, but we haven't necessarily put a name to them. So the first step to scenario planning is to identify the drivers for your scenarios. So drivers are the ways that the world may change that will impact your program implementation. They're often things that you do that you do not have full control over. So you need to prepare for the scenarios without knowing exactly which outcome will occur. So the drivers you select should be high impact, high uncertainty. In a way, worst case, best case scenario. That means that they should have a really big impact on your program. It isn't worth spending time on things that aren't going to matter. They should also have a lot of uncertainty. You don't know what the future will look like yet, and that's okay. So, some examples of drivers we have here for you to think about that could impact your program. We've mentioned some examples of these already that are drivers, that local, state, and federal laws that might be impacting your programs, budget changes, curriculum and school day priorities, as Chaz was mentioning, some curriculum changes, right? Or what about those rural areas where the schools are shifting to 4 days a week instead of 5? We talked about staffing changes. Those are really strong realities for almost everybody out there. Technology. What about a couple years ago, whenever like it started to, you started to see that every kid had a cell phone? How will that impact your program? Thinking about the impacts of technology on your program. AI is a hot topic right now, and how is that impacting your program? Technology piece can also be a driver. And then rapidly changing student needs. So we know that we're in a situation right now where there's a lot of high needs, a lot of learning loss, and it's happening at a really fast pace. You might be feeling that really strongly in your program because of where and who are in your program, and things might be changing as fast as day by day. These are all potential drivers that you need to consider in your scenario planning. So that first step, identify the drivers. Now, this tool, a 2x2 matrix, can be really helpful in scenario planning. It's just one method to do it, but this 2x2 matrix will take the identified drivers and then help you build out the possible ways that things could unfold. So this little axis on the bottom that you see here, you have the vertical axis, that y-axis, which you're going to label with two directions. For example, let's say the driver you've identified is budget changes. So at the top, you would label increased budget. And at the bottom, you would label reduced budget. On the other axis, on the horizontal, the x-axis, you're going to do the same, but for a driver, a different driver that you've identified. So let's say, going back to that curriculum example, that there's a new curriculum and there's two different ways that it could pan out. Maybe it's staff do not have the expertise for implementation, and that would go on one side. The other side, maybe students accelerate too quickly through the modules. Notice in that example, they're not exactly opposites, they're just two ways that it could go. So once you fill out this 2x2 matrix, the axes, you're going to get to the scenario planning and using logic to predict the outcomes for each set of conditions. So, what are you thinking will happen if there is a decrease in budget and staff do not feel qualified to implement the new curriculum? So, let's actually look at this. This is what it might look like with the examples that I shared. So, on the top, apologies for that. On the top, we have the increased budget, and the bottom, we have reduced budget. On the sides, we have staff don't feel qualified and students accelerate quickly. So, a possible scenario that might happen, or outcome that might happen from an increased budget and that staff don't feel qualified, is that, yay, funding is available to support staff training. That would be amazing, right? That's a positive way that this could all pan out. But what about students accelerate too quickly and we have a reduced budget? Well, teachers might run out of materials to actually teach the curriculum. You're going to have to problem solve and be creative around how are you going to facilitate this curriculum without your materials, right? Increased budget, students accelerating too quickly. Perhaps you can buy additional memberships to online resources that align with the school day. Maybe there's a platform or something that they're using within their school day that you can also sign up for, and your students can use that to practice their skills after they're done with the curriculum pieces. And then we have staff don't feel qualified and the reduced budget. Also, not necessarily a positive outcome here. That curriculum may not be implemented with fidelity. These are just possibilities, but how we came up with them is by thinking about how what is on the axes, on both axes, affect one another potentially, right? This is scenario planning. Again, no crystal ball here. We're trying to use that skill of foresight to think about, well, what could happen? What could this look like? So you're going to have an opportunity to do this for yourself. We've been looking at Maria for some time now, and she is the program director at Sunshine Youth Program. We're going to go back to a case study with Maria and SYP, and in your breakout rooms, we're going to work together to identify drivers that we see in the case study. You'll have an opportunity to label a 2x2 matrix, and the hosts of the breakout room will be facilitating this with you, and they will fill out the 2x2 matrix on a Jamboard, and together you'll discuss the possible scenarios within that matrix. We'll come back in about 15. Actually, I'm just noticing how many folks are here. You know what? Let's just stay in the main room today. We seem to be an intimate group. We can do this together. So what I'll do is I will drop in the chat for you the case study so that you all can see it. And Chaz, do you mind? I'm going to share the case study on the screen, but if you could walk through that for us. And then we'll do this activity as a whole group because I'm just seeing how things are how many folks are here. So
Sounds good to
Chaz,
me.
do you mind?
No, let's check in with Maria. Let's see how she's doing.
Okay.
So, the Sunshine Youth Program, SYP, is a community-based organization that offers 21st CCLC after-school and summer programs for at-risk youth in a low-income neighborhood. The program focuses on academic enrichment, life skills development, and community engagement. Maria is the program director of SYP. She was hired 2 years ago. Maria is a passionate and dedicated leader who believes in the power of education to transform lives. SYP has had many ups and downs over the past 2 years. As Maria has started to build her skills as a servant leader, she's learned a lot, and she's trying to think about how the future of her organization may impact the implementation of 21st CCLC after school programs. Maria attends all the organization's budget meetings and has observed that the fundraising team has reported falling private donations. Because of that, SYP may face layoffs soon. In response to this pressing problem, the organization's leaders are applying for 2 state grants that cover the budget loss, but the application process takes almost a year. Within the 21st CCLC program, Maria has faced significant challenges with program attendance and family engagement. Several program ideas that Maria implemented had no attendees, and regular program attendance hasn't bounced back from those failures. Additionally, Maria hasn't been able to schedule as many events as the program had in previous years. The school district SYP serves is struggling to meet the academic needs of the local student population. Only 35% of students are testing as proficient on the state exams, and the percentage has fallen over the last 5 years. Changes affecting academic progress include larger classes and less experienced teachers due to budget cuts, a new math curriculum that many teachers dislike, and few that implement with fidelity, and a growing population of students that require special education services without accompanying resource growth. Because Maria has focused on connecting with her program's community, she's learned that the district also has a changing population due to a growing number of English language learners and migrant students. Many of their families report not getting enough services and, like the school, failing to meet the students' needs. The population in Maria's district is growing. There are several new major employers in her area, including an industrial manufacturing company, a technology startup, and a big box store. These companies employ many residents, featuring a wide range of careers and salaries. These companies join existing employers, several large farms, a pharmaceutical company, a community college, hospital, and wide range of small businesses. Maria wants to plan for the next 3 to 5 years of her out of school and summer programs at SYP. All right. So we're going to create a list of drivers here. So after reading the case study, does anybody want to share out what they think some potential drivers might be that we could put in our 2x2 matrix? You can go ahead and share in the chat or unmute if you'd like. Oh, budget. Yes. Budget is always a driver, isn't it? Oh, man. That money and the purse strings are always a concern, especially given that all this ESSER funding is starting to run out. Can anybody think of something else that we can put on our axes? Attendance. There we go. That's right. Lower attendance is definitely going to negatively affect the program. What about this new curriculum? That seems like it's going to be a problem. And it seems like it's a problem not just with implementing the curriculum, but with teachers that want to, have the desire to actually implement that curriculum. Can anybody think of one more that we might be able to add here? Academic achievement decrease. That's right. 35% of students are testing as proficient on state exams. So we definitely want to get that up, especially because that percentage has fallen over the last 5 years, right? Okay. Excellent. Thank you guys for sharing so much. So now let's pick 2 of these as the drivers for our 2x2 matrix. What do we think are the most prominent drivers here that we might be able to select? Well, I think given how common budgeting is, yes, I was going to say thank you, Ebony. Great minds think alike. Look at that. given how common that is, that's probably something that we want to add to, we want to select as one of our two drivers for our 2x2 matrix, right? So what else could we select? We need one more driver to put on our matrix here. Attendance. Excellent, right? So we want to make sure that we have kids in our program that we can engage with and help enrich, right? So we also want to try to focus on attendance here. So now let's go ahead and fill out our 2x2 matrix here. So again, remember, we're going to place one of our drivers on the x-axis and one of our drivers on the y-axis. And that'll let us troubleshoot scenarios moving forward.
I'm wondering what exactly we want to put for budget. I think decreased budget
Yeah, a
makes a
decreasing
lot of
budget.
sense for one of those, but what about the other side?
I mean, I think the other side might be increased budget because again, they are applying for other grants, so they could potentially have more funding in the future.
I'm going to add that as um, a specific outcome because through grants is an important piece here. It's not just
Yeah,
falling from the sky.
especially because if we look back at the case study, that fundraising is starting to dry up a little bit, which is probably tied to our attendance.
Speaking of,
All right, so we have lower attendance that we can place on one side here. And then on the other side, we can put increased attendance, right? Which can have positive or potentially negative effects if we're looking at decreased budget and increased attendance.
right. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, that looks good to me.
For us in each of the quadrants. So just let me know where you'd like to begin.
So let's go ahead and start with decreased budget and increased attendance. So what scenarios do you guys think could arise if we have a lack of, if our budget keeps shrinking, but our numbers keep increasing? What struggles do you think we might run into?
I've got a few rolling around my head, but I'd love to hear from folks
As do
today.
I. Lack of resources. And that's right, an increase in staff and student ratios, right? Which is going to negatively affect the quality of our programming.
I mean, let's hope that this won't happen, but like, what if you reach a point where you have to turn people away or put them on a
Yeah.
waiting list?
Yeah, I was gonna say Ebony's on top of it again. Great minds, right? There could be a long wait list, right? And then that could potentially turn other people off to, trying to get into your program because it's like, oh, well, why bother? Because the wait list is so long anyway. Program sustainability, right? Yeah, because in the long term, if we keep running these deficits, then we're going to just run out of resources. I mean, all types of resources, right? Human resources and actual physical resources. So let's look at the more positive side of that now that we've had some great examples here. Thank you for sharing those. So let's look at increased attendance and increased budget through grants. So let's look at the brighter side of that. So what are some situations that we could run into there? Potential opportunities, still challenges though, right? Because I mean, you could also run into not knowing, like you're not efficiently using that budget that you're given, right? You could have that money, but you could, squander it. But with the increased attendance and increased budget through grants, it gives us the opportunity to expand programming. Yes, Ebony, are you reading my mind? That is exactly something that could be implemented pretty easily, right? And then it gives us the opportunity to branch out, see what other stuff we could do. we might be able to bring in community partners that might not be willing to volunteer their time, but we could, use the increased budget to partner with them to, increase our programming opportunities.
I am one would assume that with increased attendance that you would be able to spend all the dollars through the increased budget. But I do think that there's a way this plays out where you don't spend all the funds and you have to give some back.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know how budgeting goes, right? If we don't spend these funds and we have to give them back, then next year they're a lot more hesitant to give us those funds again. And that can often happen when we haven't thoroughly explored all of the venues, in our local community, right? Because there's so many opportunities, but if we just don't know about them, because we can't know about all of them, then, we can miss some, and then we run the risk of not being able to spend all those funds. Okay, those are great situations that we could run into with increased attendance and increased budget through grants. So let's look at a lower attendance, but we still have an increased budget from the grants. I know that it would definitely give us the opportunity to do a little bit of networking, sort of reach out and try to, recruit more students for our programming. What other scenarios could transpire given lower attendance but increased budget through grants? Hmm,
I think the same thing applies here. There's that risk that you might have to um, give back funds that are unspent.
that's right. Yeah. Oh, I like that too, Jay. Diversity of programs, right? It gives us, it actually provides us an opportunity to do a lot more small group work too with students, right? So even though we have lower attendance, we could have really engaging and interactive, groups and courses that we're putting together for our students. And then that could also, oh, there we go. Thank you, Shonda. And those give opportunities to also increase attendance, right? Because once people see, just how innovative and interactive your program is, then that word of mouth spreads pretty quickly. The kid pops their head in and they're like, hey, wait, what are you doing? I want to be an after school. Wait, hold on, let me talk to my mom. And then all of a sudden that kid shows up on your roster next week. We've all had that happen, right? Okay, so let's look at the last quadrant we have right here. So we have lower attendance and decreased budget. Now, like we were saying before, not all of these scenarios are going to be positive, right? So what are some of the situations that could arise from having a decreased budget and having lower attendance in our programs? I think we could look at program sustainability too, right? Because even if we can't even if we can kind of afford it right now, when the board's budgeting for a program or whoever is budgeting for a program, they might look at it and say, is it worth continuing this program if we only have such a small amount of kids in it? Anybody else? I know we don't like to look at the negative side of it, right? But sometimes that's just part of, looking at scenarios and, really using foresight, because foresight is even looking at the perils and bumps in the road too, right?
I think that you might have to get creative when we talk about like data tracking and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
with lower attendance um, and a decreased budget, I think you might have to work harder to show impactful data.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then, a couple outliers can, also really negatively impact your data at that point too, which is something to keep in mind. I think it's just harder in general to keep kids engaged and develop meaningful and impactful programming when your budget is so low. Yeah, so is it worth it to keep the program going? And so that's something that you'll increase it. That's a question you'll increasingly get, from your stakeholders. Like, is it worth continuing at least in this fashion, or is it time to pivot? Oh, positive. That's true. You could become a little niche program. Oh, and
Thank you for going.
stockpiling resources. There we go. Seeing the bright side, the silver lining and everything. Because then, yeah, you could just pivot into like, okay, well, we're going to just be a STEM after school program. We're going to be a music after school program, like Brittany was involved in. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. And so you can see just how impactful this 2x2 matrix can be, and just how one idea can spiral into another idea, spiral into another idea, and all of a sudden you have all of these ideas that you've brainstormed, and then you can plan for these bumps along the road or anticipate the positives. It's it's important to look at how those might actually differ too, depending on how you set up those matrices, right? So once you've created all these scenarios, you're ready to make a plan about how you're going to address these challenges if they do come up, right? So in the chat box, let us know how you'd respond to any of the scenarios that we've posited. So, or we can look at the one that we've set up at our matrix, right? So you have a program that has a reduced budget, and your staff is struggling with supporting the low attendance numbers, right? So under these drivers, your staff has to sort of cut staff because of budget cuts, and you're ending up hiring, staff that is less experienced and perhaps younger. Um, they'd probably have limited training, and they don't know how to support the academic needs of your students, right? So families might start to complain the students aren't able to finish their homework during program time, and that's never been a problem before. So how might we address that scenario? Right? So we've brainstormed the scenario, and now we're working through, if it comes up, how we possible ways to address it so that we can solve this problem, so we can be ready and anticipate it using our foresight. Something that comes to mind for me while you guys are chewing on that is uh, you might want to implement a comprehensive onboarding plan. So these students, I mean, these young workers that are coming to you, they might not have a lot of knowledge coming in, but if you have a robust onboarding plan set up for them, then they can hit the ground running with, at least some training, and they're ready to actually interact and work with your students. Can anybody else think of any ways to address this scenario? Ooh, I like that. Using certified teachers on rotation 1 or 2 days a week. Yeah, that's true. Because we all know burnout is real, right? Especially these, classroom teachers, they've been, teaching for 8 hours. So coming in and then being able to give their all 5 days a week is difficult. But if you came to them and said, hey, listen, what if we just put you on like Mondays and Fridays? Is that something you can do? Yeah, I like that. It's a great idea. Something else that popped up in my head was peer learning communities, right? You can set the students, as they're trying to complete their homework, you can set them up with homework buddies that are strong in an area where they're weak. And especially with the low, so this is an example of where your low attendance can actually help you, right? Because then you can just have these little homework pods where kids are working together and just trying to crunch through all of their homework so that they can get to the fun program.
I was also thinking about that the families are saying that the kids aren't finishing homework in their program.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how it was never a problem before. Like I would want to better understand what changed around the homework time.
Yeah.
is there an increase in homework, or is there something affecting the structure of that time that's not allowing them to complete things? Has there been a shift in the culture, and students are just not doing homework during the time they're supposed to? I would want to better understand
Hmm.
what those things are. But a potential solution, it would be looking for, like, if there's community groups out there that do volunteer tutoring, like retired math teachers, or maybe there's like a local organization that is looking for opportunities for their staff to do some volunteer hours. Like, I know that there's a lot of corporations that allow staff to take time to do volunteerism. So looking into those options to bring in some folks so that there's some more one-on-one during homework time, and helping kids not just do the math, but get it done. They don't even necessarily have to know math. It might just be as much as just having extra people in the room that could help just ensure that kids were staying focused and walking them through and being friendly. Um, and maybe that would be a positive
Absolutely, yeah.
outcome.
And I mean, going along with that, you could see if there are any like high school students, because a lot of districts that have community service requirements too. So that could be a wonderful way for kids to get through their community service hours. Well, there we go. Yeah, collaborate with local technical colleges or universities for student teachers too. That's right, because that provides an invaluable opportunity for a young teacher to get experience working with struggling students in a non-traditional classroom environment. Excellent, excellent. So as we look at these potential solutions, it's important to identify what barriers there might be for the problem, right? To implementing the solutions for the problem. So let's move on and look at a couple different ways that we can test out the plans that we've developed. So as we consider the future, we have to test the possibilities for whether the solutions are actually going to work. So we're going to explore two possible ways to test those right now. One is the roadmap, and one is the wind tunnel method. So with road mapping, it's a process for understanding all the inputs that guide the implementation of your program. The goal is to understand how all these inputs interact and which is going to help you prepare for future impacts. Your wind tunnel method, that's more focused on stress testing your solution for future scenario. So as a future planning team, you're going to be confronted with all series of stressors, right? All a gamut of different things that could challenge the solutions that you have. And you have to predict how your solutions will fare in each case of these possible stressors, which kind of reminds me of the early days at NASA. It's like when they're planning Apollo missions, engineers had to use both road mapping and wind tunnel testing to make sure that the lunar landings were actually going to land. They meticulously mapped out all the phases of the mission from launch to moon landing to return, but they also subjected their plans to rigorous stress testing and their astronauts to rigorous stress testing, simulating worst case scenarios, right? So that's basically what we're talking about here. Oh, yeah, and we're gonna launch a feedback poll right now, just to get a little bit of input about how we're doing and how useful you guys might end up finding that. So let's give you guys a minute to fill out this poll. Thank you so much for taking the time. All right, so as we continue with that poll, we're gonna go on and we're gonna detail what goes into some of these two strategies here. So let's start with road mapping. So road mapping is a process for understanding all the inputs that guide the implementation of your program. The goal is to understand how they interact. So let's think about the scenario that Maria is facing. She's got a falling budget. She's got a challenging new curriculum. So what factors interact to dictate how Maria can respond to the challenge? Some examples include, staff knowledge or student enrollment levels, school day needs or academic priorities, and program budget. But why don't you share out in the chat box some of the other factors that you think are going to impact Maria's ability to address the scenario? I know while you guys are thinking about it, something that occurred to me right off the bat was the infrastructure of the program, and just how it's set up with the facilities and the materials and supplies. So, I mean, those things could very easily shrink as your budget is reduced, and that could be a challenge. Oh, academic performance. Yep, that's another challenge, right? So we have a new curriculum, we have reduced budget, so it's difficult to support the students that are already starting to fall behind with their math scores, as we saw in the case study.
I'm also thinking about Maria's unique program in that it's not actually tied to a specific school.
Mhm.
And so her students, although they come primarily from one school district, they might have different needs.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, students have different needs to begin with, but just from whatever curriculum is being used at the different schools, um, and even just elementary school to elementary school within that district, there might be one specific school that's um, over or underperforming compared to the others. And how are you going to differentiate the supports in your program to be able to make sure that each child is getting what they need? Um,
absolutely.
it's a challenge.
It is a challenge. And I mean, along with that, there could be one school in the district that has a larger population of students that have special needs, and so how do you make sure that you're serving those students and differentiating, to make sure that they're supported in the way that's necessary? Not to mention, the different socioeconomic backgrounds of, the different schools that Maria's program pulls from and the challenges that that could present. All right, so let's now that we've looked at how road mapping works, let's look at the wind tunnel method of stress testing. So the wind tunnel method, we're going to throw all of the possible scenarios at our solution to see what could prove to be a barrier to implementing that solution, and see how our solution will actually respond to each one of the stressors. So things didn't go quite as planned for Maria, right? She wants to address the challenge from her 2x2 matrix, but she's encountering some bad weather. So we're going to look at some of the potential challenges and decide whether the solutions will still work. And then we're going to talk about why or why not.
So here's the 2x2 we made just to put it in our brains again. And then, oh, sorry about that. And then here's the link to the Padlet that everybody can jump into and add what they would like to the different stressors that are on the screen. To type in the Padlet, you can just click little pencil, and you're going to add just your comments there.
So for each of these potential challenges, we're going to decide whether the solution, could still work. And then we're going to talk about why or why not. So we've got staff annoyed by the new curriculum, and 20% of them quit. Would not be the first time. The new staff are not always reliable. 3 staff members have been absent at least 5 times without notice, which is a challenge that we all struggle with, right? And then we have the training you scheduled on your new math curriculums poorly attended because you can only hold it on a weekend, which we know is a notoriously difficult time to get people to buy in on training. Stress 4, after so much work to train your staff on the new curriculum, the school district decides to change that curriculum after only 2 years. That never happens, right, guys? And then SYP's application for the next cohort of the 21st CCLC programs is not accepted. So the school year will be the end of the grant. So let's start with stress one here. So how do we think this is actually going to impact Maria's ability to implement a solution? Do we think that so oh, there we go. There we go. I see some activity in the chat there. I see some activity in the Padlet there. I love it. Love our brains working. Well, if we are already experiencing a reduced budget and possible low attendance numbers, it's certainly going to be difficult to recruit more staff, right? We're not going to have the budget to be able to recruit more staff. We're not going to be able to, we probably won't be able to recruit higher quality staff. And that sort of feeds into our second stressor here, right? Because if you're not able to recruit higher quality staff, you're probably going to end up with more and more of them not being there. Also, if you don't have as high attendance, even the people that want to be there might not be as engaged in your program.
See, someone's added here that
There we go.
Culture and staff buy-in.
It's difficult. Like, improving a lot of the things that you would do to improve your community and culture, like a lot of the solutions Maria might lean on to do that, are things that might require funding in some way, shape, or form. And so if our funding is lower, then that's also going to be a huge challenge.
I'm also thinking about that, that one scenario where all those grants come in, even if there is the end of the 21st CCLC funding or ESSER funding, it's not on this scenario,
Sure.
Stressor, but what if you do get other grants that you can use to continue the program? That will certainly alleviate some stress. It won't necessarily solve the issues of staff having been having left the program or the challenges of the new curriculum.
Yeah, that's certainly an excellent point. Frustrated staff due to some committing and attending trainers and others not. That's true, because the staff that still has that buy-in might start to get disillusioned because they see that not all of the staff is on the same page or has that same level of commitment. And then that can negatively affect their own commitment or their desire to, help out. Oh, yeah, and then uncertainty around funding and programmatic requirements with the ending of the 21st CCLC grant. That's a good point too, right? Because if you're no longer under the 21st CCLC grant, that does change what requirements you have for your program and what's required of you. And I guess that cuts both ways, right? Because it also sort of opens up other venues for things that you might not have been able to do under 21st CCLC funding, but it also presents, a significant challenge. Any other thoughts?
I was just reflecting on the comment around attending trainings and others not attending trainings. Getting that staff buy-in, but also setting expectations. Sometimes that's difficult as a leader to put down and say, this is what we're doing. But maybe that's what has to happen, to develop a good staff culture. Maybe there aren't regular staff meetings, but that's something that should be implemented so that everybody can be on the same page. And also understanding, why the training's happening and making sure that it's coming from a place where staff feel like they're being supported and it's not like, oh, well, you're not doing a good enough job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, I mean, sometimes your hands might be tied with that when it comes to, implementing really high quality, impactful, engaging trainings just because of budgetary concerns. Yeah. Balancing staff discipline and maintaining recruiting staff. Yeah, that's tricky, right? So how do you make sure that you help still have a positive community culture when you do routinely have to monitor or discipline your staff and you're regularly bringing in new people? Those are definitely going to be challenges to any sort of solution that you'd want to implement.
Some of this discussion is reminding me about some of the remaining pillars that we have yet to get to.
That's
So
true.
we hope you all join us for there's three more in this series,
Yes. Yep.
where we'll
Stay
dive
tuned,
into a
folks.
few things that might help with maintaining uh, balancing staff discipline and maintaining not so much discipline but like supporting staff so that they stick around. Anyway, just thought I would throw that in there
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
reminding
Make
me
sure
of
you
things
get
to come.
make sure that you all tune in same time, same channel next week, and we'll also continue that discussion. So thank you guys so much for your input. Let's go ahead and move on.
So we've talked about a lot of different things that you can do with Foresight. There's a few more that I want to make sure we touch on today. Very quickly on vision, we talked a lot about vision in conceptualization. And if you're interested in what that webinar entailed, it will be available on our website. But just to bring us back and remind us about the importance of vision, you always need to have your organization's vision in mind, right? All program implementations should align back to that vision. The vision is different than your mission in that your mission is like the meat and potatoes. It's what you do, it's who you do it for, but your vision is like the why, um, the big why behind it. So it articulates, yes, what you're doing, but it's how you are doing it, and why you're doing it, and how does that then feed into your vision for a better world, right? How do you want to change the world? Um, so vision is very important to foresight, and it can go hand in hand in that you foresee this future for your organization, but you need to formulate that vision together with your stakeholders and have it agreed upon so that everybody's headed to the same place together. And that's gonna involve some foresight, right? To know what the future holds and know where you want to head. The other part of this is, making sure that you are using decision making in a timely fashion. We don't want to rush to decisions, but we need to be agile. So agility was one of our four squares of foresight earlier. And we need to make sure that we're using agility in our decision making. Um, Things need to be done in a timely manner, um, to make sure that we're maintaining momentum and moving forward. But we don't want to rush. It's a careful balancing act. But there's actually four types of leadership agility, the way that agility would present in your leadership context. So it's where we're going to focus on that big picture, and we're willing to pursue the organization's overall vision. Then we have stakeholder. So this is whenever you as leaders take the time to understand the stakeholders and their unique needs. You then prioritize making changes to meet those needs and understand the diverse perspectives of all our stakeholders. We have creative, which is where we're trying to use creativity in our problem solving to address new and developing challenges. And then finally, self leadership. So, this is a type of leader who is committed to self reflection and is willing to experiment with different methods or ways of thinking. And when you find better methods, you then make a switch. So, there's a little bit of growth in there. Um, So these four different types of leadership agility: context setting, stakeholder, creative, and self leadership. We're going to use some examples for you now to have you think about what form of leadership agility might be needed in the particular scenario. Is it context setting, stakeholder, creative, or self leadership? So, our first scenario here: the new director of Sunshine Youth Program is much more interested in engaging youth in college and career readiness rather than traditional academic programs that you have hosted up until now. So there's going to be a poll on your screen here, and we'll ask you to cast your vote. Which type of agility do you think best fits this scenario? Is it context setting, stakeholder, creative, or self leadership? Remember, this is about Sunshine Youth Program that we've been looking at for several weeks now. Do you think that the college and career readiness over traditional academic programming is a better fit or a better direction for SYP? What type of agility do you think best fits? Remember, context setting, stakeholder, creative, self leadership. We'll give you a few more seconds. If you're not sure, it's okay. Give it your best guess. I see a couple answers coming in.
There we go. Don't be afraid to take a chance on an answer.
All right, so let's take a look at what we've got here. We've got folks who said context setting. Most of you said context setting, also stakeholder and creative. So I'm sure there could be different possible answers based on kind of what is in your head and what you're thinking about. But when we thought about this, we were thinking stakeholder. And the reason why we were thinking stakeholder is because we have a new director who hasn't really been in the program. SYP is mostly younger youth, and that shift from traditional academic programs to college and career readiness feels maybe a little untimely for the stakeholders, particularly the students, right? It's not that we don't want to have conversations about career and college readiness, but when we're working with elementary or even early middle school youth, we got to think about what is best for them. And if SYP is already seeing that their students are struggling in academic areas, this shift is not right now. Maybe later, maybe another time, but for right now, we're really looking at that stakeholder leadership agility, because it's looking back at what are the students really need. Let's try again. Again, your perspective may be different, and that's okay. Let's look at another scenario. The district is facing a huge shortage of after school services for students. They sign a contract with Sunshine Youth Program to offer after school programs on behalf of the district. You don't have enough space or staff to manage the influx of students you will have next semester. So there's going to be a poll on your screen here. Think about what agility best fits this scenario. Is it context setting, stakeholder, creative, or self leadership? We've got a wonderful opportunity here for SYP getting contracted with the district. That's huge. But similar to my own personal experience, sounds like they're wrestling with some square footage concerns. What are they going to do about it? What's the best agility for this scenario? Give you another moment. Right. Great, thank you. Let's take a look at what we have for our answers. So we have context setting, but most of you said creative. Again, your perspective might and explanation might warrant a different answer. But when we thought about this, we're with the folks that were thinking creative, because it sounds like they're going to have to do some creative problem solving to capitalize on this opportunity. And how are they going to fit the students in their program? And how are they going to manage staff student ratio if they don't have enough staff with the influx of students? That's going to take a lot of creativity to figure out how are we going to do this. Perhaps that contract came with some dollars and you could hire new people. And then we're back to the same thing we were talking about moments ago about onboarding staff and choosing high quality staff. All of these things require that level of creativity. All right, we've got one more scenario for you today. Here we have Maria, and she has found a lot of successes and a lot of challenges in her 2 years at Sunshine Youth Program. In her annual meeting with the CEO, Lila, shares a new book on approaches for impactful leadership with Maria. That seems very nice. Let's take a look at this poll and see what you think. What about the agility that best fits this scenario? So Maria sat down with the CEO. The CEO has gifted her a book on the approaches for impactful leadership. What might the leader be seeing in Maria? What might Maria need to do? Give you a moment to chime in here on this poll. All right, let's take a look at our poll results here. Hey, look at this. A unanimous vote here on self leadership. Well, you know what? Great minds, because we were also thinking about self leadership. Self leadership is that reflective piece where you're looking back as a leader at um, your own growth, your own development as a leader. And Lila, the CEO, seems to think the same thing for Maria. Probably sees the potential and just wants to further support Maria in her growth as a leader of SYP. So this is all; these are all great things to help us with developing our skills around foresight and going back to where we began with those 4 different areas that are going to help support your development of foresight: the future thinking, scenario planning, vision, and agility. We want to hear from you before we close out today using the stamp in your annotation tool, which you can find if you go to the top of your screen where it says Brittany sharing screen, the drop down annotation tool, use a stamp and just chime in here on which one of these things that you think you would like to focus on for yourself. We talked a lot about scenario planning and going through that process, but do you think that's right for you, or is there another one that you think is right for you? Go ahead and take a moment to use that annotation tool and tell us what you think you want to work on. All right, Tiffany, agility. Yes. Yes, Lori. Future thinking and vision. You know what? You need both of them. You really do. Shonda on future thinking. This is great. Well, hopefully some of what we've discussed today and the tools, tips, and tricks that we've shared will help you in developing your skills of foresight. But give yourself grace. All of this takes time. And you've started the process by participating in today's webinar. You can find more leadership on our website. And you can also join us for the remaining 3 sessions in this series, which will be on growth, stewardship, and community. We're going to wrap things up here today and share a few things, some resources for you. Here are the drawings. Thank you. So here we have how you can reach out to us and contact us. There's our email address, info@21stcclc.org. You can also scan the QR codes to sign up for our newsletter, the NTech Messenger, which includes a bunch of information on uh, things relevant to the OST fields, information about upcoming webinars or trainings that we'll be offering, and resources that you might be able to utilize in your programs. You can connect with us on X or on LinkedIn. And of course, our website, which is 21stcclcntech.org. And I'll take a moment to show you. Here's our website. If you want to connect with us, you can check out our news. What's new newsletter and blog is all there for you. You can sign up for the newsletter, right? And get this to your email address. You can also check out our resources and professional learning. The servant leadership course that I mentioned is under our resources, where you'll see Becoming a Leader. It's a mini course. It's a 1-hour course that goes over these 10 pillars of servant leadership. But if you're looking for that deep dive, these webinars have been a part of a 10-part series. And there's 3 more, as I mentioned, left in this series. We also ask that you take a moment to provide some feedback on today's session using the link that was just dropped in the chat to you. Thank you so much, Dave, for doing that. This really helps inform what we do and making sure that we're providing things that are useful to you as program leaders and staff. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention Summer Symposium. So Summer Symposium is coming up this July 31st to August 1st, which is going to be in San Francisco. This is a conference-like opportunity for 21st CCLC program leaders and staff. It is a free conference, and there's a wealth of sessions that you can attend. And the NTAC team will be there running some sessions throughout the 2 days, 3 days, 2 days. But you can register at this address if you're interested in attending. Like I said, we'll be in San Francisco, and registration is free. You can just click on the registration link and fill out the information to get signed up. It features all kinds of wonderful information. The theme this year is the Bridge to Excellence. So we'll be looking at how we are connecting to tomorrow and solving the issues that we're facing today, such as funding issues, COVID related, trauma-informed care. We'll be talking about planning for the future and troubles along the way, like re-engaging youth in our program who have disengaged. And removing roadblocks. So thinking about things that are going to help our students in the post-secondary experiences, thinking about the beyond, the college, the career pathways that they might take. And we'll also be talking about connecting with our communities, building partnerships with businesses and other nonprofits to help fill in where 21st CCLC doesn't can't reach or doesn't reach. But you can sign up. Like I said, registration is free. You take a moment, please, before you go today to fill out the survey. The link was dropped in the chat. It really helps us inform our offerings. Please sign up for the newsletter so you can get information about our upcoming events. We've got a couple next week, including one of our huddles. Huddles are 30-minute sessions that we go over tools and things provided through NTAC or other ways. And they're just really great short webinars to provide you with some resources that might be helpful. The next subject that we're taking a look at is the FAFSA. So if you are working with families who might have students that are thinking about college and what comes next, that would be the huddle for you. And that would be on Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Thank you again for joining us today. Take that moment to fill out the survey link if you would, please. Chaz, thanks for presenting with me today.
Absolutely. It was a whole bunch of fun talking about Foresight. I foresee plenty more presentations in our future.
Indeed. Thank you all again for joining us. Fill out that survey. We'll see you next time.